What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Lance Johnson of Amplomedia. And Lance, I'm going to formally introduce you in a second, but I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, some of my favorites are, I had a D. Clevitt on. Actually, you talk about this. I listened to some of your stuff. It's great. About streamlining and talking about SOPs and systems. So I had a D. Clevitt on who, that's what her business does. She actually comes into businesses and helps them document their processes. And, we talked about our favorite productivity tools, our favorite softwares, and really talked about how do you streamline onboarding, client onboarding, even streamline staff onboarding. So that was an interesting episode. Another one was from Kevin Hurrigan. Kevin Hurrigan runs Spinutech. He's had an agency land since 1995. So it's interesting to hear the agency landscape, business landscape, the internet landscape over the past couple decades. So that was a good one too. So check that out, inspiredinsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast, and we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Lance, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the hosts so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, but most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways on how to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. Lance has a podcast. We're going to talk about that as well. And I'm excited to introduce Lance Johnson, the founder of Amplomedia. And they're a video-first digital agency, and he helps businesses in Canada and the US overcome customer acquisition challenges through conversion optimized marketing strategies. We'll talk about what that means. He also has a web series, Amplify Your Business. And out of those interviews, he's distilled the wisdom, which I was hoping was on Audible, maybe sometime Nancy will put it on Audible, into the secret sauce to building a successful business, a handbook for entrepreneurs. So Lance, thanks for joining me.
It's such a privilege to be here, Jeremy. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show, and kudos to you for what you're doing and helping businesses develop their podcasts. I mean, it's a lot of work for a lot of people to try to figure out the nuances of that production challenge, and to have somebody, like you said, that you can just hit that easy button. I mean, that's a dream come true, and the power of podcasting is so large that everybody who's listening right now, if they don't have a podcast, they definitely need to be talking to you about it, because it's a huge potential growth opportunity for their business.
Lance, I appreciate that. And I did not pay him to say that, but thank you. I'm going to pull up your website since there is a video piece to this. We have to have a video piece, right? Because you're all about video first. So let's talk about Amplomedia and what you do, and we'll get into it.
Sure. Yeah. So we started out 13 years ago doing animated explainers. And so we were the first digital studio that focused on that in our marketplace at the time, and it came out of a need in the marketplace. There just wasn't anybody that was doing it locally, and one of the challenges that I was finding is that when we would create these great videos for people, I'd go back 6 months later and just ask them about how the video was performing for them. Was it helping kind of move the needle in their business? And most of them were embarrassed to say that, they hadn't even got it up on their website yet, or they maybe tweeted
You created this amazing thing and then they didn't even put it up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so they were happy with the video still, but they just didn't really know how to use it. And so that was really frustrating from a strategic standpoint. And I came at this business, from another business that I had, which was a strategic consultancy. And so it was just really killing that part of me when I would hear that. And I would think, well, geez, I'm never going to sell video number 2 or 3 or 5 if they never experienced a return off of the first video. So I thought for the success of my business, I'm going to have to teach them how to do this a little better. And so we started to do that, but the problem with it is that most of them didn't have time to really take our education that we were giving to them for free and implement it. And so I started to realize we needed to do this for them. And so we started to develop a full service agency wrapped around that, because as soon as you kind of fixed one thing, there was another thing within the marketing mix that needed to be fixed as well. And so I started looking at it and go, okay, well, really, what is the purpose of all this marketing? And at the end of the day, it's about generating new customers. And how do you generate new customers? Well, you have to get the lead awareness first. And so that's really where we started to pivot our focus. And so we still do a ton of video production, and we weave that into every aspect of or of our tactics that we roll out as part of the marketing mix for our clients, but with a real focus strategically on how do we generate those leads, and then how do we nurture them into really eager prospects that are really interested in having conversations with you, and then how do we turn those conversations into actual closed business. And so that's what we focus on, is lead generation, customer acquisition, and we leverage the power of marketing in every aspect we can.
I love how you talk about kind of boiling it down to what's the purpose, right? And you
Yeah.
talk about the benefits a lot and not the features, which is really instructive for me. And I'd love for you to talk about the buyer journey a little bit, because I know that you
Yeah.
help these companies in each kind of aspect of this buyer journey. So maybe start with how you think about the buyer journey when you're working
Yeah.
with customers.
Yeah, and this is one of the things actually that I think it frustrates me when I look at what other companies do, and historically what the marketing industry has been doing. And I think what has really given the marketing industry a bad name or bad rap over the years, in terms of really not being focused on results and more just focused on doing marketing for the sake of marketing. And so marketing really needs to start with that analysis as to, okay, so what is the typical buyer's journey amongst the audience that you're trying to target? And so when I think about it, I break it down into really a simple model. And so if you think of your buyer's journey as a typical sales funnel, and for those who are just listening right now, I have my hand up kind of in a V, right, shape. And so at the top and the wider part of the V is where people are coming in. And that top activity is really focused on awareness, right? So the audience needs to be aware that you exist before they'll move into the next stage down that buyer's journey, which is consideration. And this is where they're considering you to be a potential solution to whatever problem or challenge that they maybe are experiencing. And then the stage after that is analysis. And so this is where they're really comparing you to the rest of the options that they have out there. And one of those options that we don't really talk about a whole lot usually from a industry's perspective is the option of doing nothing, right? And so just continuing to do nothing is definitely one of those options. But the other analysis that they're doing is, are you the best fit compared to maybe some of the competitors who are offering something similar? So you have to have awareness before they'll consider you to be an option. And then you have to pass the analysis test to determine whether or not you're the best fit. And if you are, then it comes down to, do I buy or do I take a pass on this? So the conversion, the point of conversion. So that's the simplified buyer's journey. And so when we start crafting strategy and start crafting campaigns, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are communicating to people with the right kind of messaging at each one of those stages of the buyer's journey. Because if you are communicating to them incorrectly, for what stage they're at, you're going to lose them right away. So as an example, if we, meet somebody virtually online, through some social media or an outreach campaign or whatever the case might be, and we are really focusing on giving them all the information they need at the analysis stage to choose us to demonstrate that we're the most skilled at what we do, um, you're probably going to lose their attention because you've started a conversation with them at a point in which they're not really looking for that information. They're just at a little bit more of that awareness stage, right? And then vice versa. If we keep that conversation at awareness, when we know that they've been over to the website, we know that they've watched a few videos or interacted with some white papers or case studies or whatever the lead magnet might be, and we just keep it at that surface awareness level, we're going to lose them as well because we haven't demonstrated that we've passed what they need in terms of the analysis stage. And so it's about knowing where they're at and positioning that content into them at the right point in time.
Let's talk, Lance. There was a crane company.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about some examples and the kind of the awareness, analysis, conversion, because I know you created over 100 videos with the company, and maybe talk about where they fit in so people can understand.
Yeah. I think they are a really good example, actually. So the company is out of Vancouver, Canada, and so they ship these cranes across North America, well, like even including the Mexico, Canada, the
Mm.
U.S. And so they have a really big footprint, a lot of different kinds of audiences, and so these are big construction cranes for building, massive high rises to smaller construction sites as well.
I just
And
want to say one thing, Lance. If this stuff works for a crane company, like if someone's thinking, well, I'm sure it could work for you. I mean, crane companies are a real sexy business, of course, but so I love this because this applies to any business, really. So,
completely, yeah. And so the crane company, like we do a lot of work in the B2B space, and so they're marketing themselves to other businesses is what they're trying to do. Now, the challenge that they were having is that they just were not getting a lot of leads, and so they had a website that was a placeholder more than anything. It was not conversion optimized at all. There wasn't any real flow for the customer to land there, get an understanding as to what these guys did, and then have the persuasion necessary to start to nudge them down that buyer's journey. And so what we did is we created a bunch of videos that would work at that awareness stage to try to get the traffic over to the website. So those were then placed in social media. They were sent out in outreach campaigns in email and in LinkedIn. They were also used from a PR perspective as well. And so what we were trying to do there is explain what Bigfoot, it was the name of the company, Bigfoot Cranes did. And so what was their unique kind of selling proposition? So the very high level awareness piece, very sexy videos. Like you said, like the crane industry can be kind of cool because, we would throw the drone up and get some great footage of these cranes being erected, that would be 100 feet into the air. And so just really cool videos. And it was very manly kind of feel to them and so on, right? Because it was construction industry. And so we created all these really sexy videos, and then the traffic would come into the website. So then once they started looking around at some of the products, what we want to do is make sure that we communicated the product advantages and benefits as well as we could. And so we created a lot of videos on every one of the products and the different feature sets. And this is where we typically get into the how something works. And we start talking about the features as opposed to the
so would
benefit.
this kind of be in the analysis portion
Yeah.
or no? Like the awareness, you're making kind of these really cool videos about the company. Maybe there's drone videos.
Yep.
And people are kind of becoming aware, and then you dig in each of the products you're creating videos for.
Yep. So those ones are much more around that analysis. Is it the right product? Does it meet what my needs are? What is the feature set? At the consideration stage, we layer in a lot of the case studies as well as testimonials. And so we film the product in action, but then we also are talking to their clients and getting some really great sound bites from them talking about what they love about working with that company. And so the thing that you want to know as well is that in that buyer's journey, there's an overlap there. So those videos that we could be using as consideration-based video purpose can also be repurposed in different nurturing sequences that we'd be sprinkling out to people to continue to engage them even after the analysis stage or while they're in the analysis stage. And so we created a series of videos for every one of their products, a series of videos that were going to create awareness, a bunch of testimonial, case study, authority, kind of we know what we're doing type pieces. And also within their industry, there's a lot of failure to actually provide the level of service that their customers really need or demand. And so,
Like if something needs a repair or something like that, is that what you mean?
exactly, a product goes down, right? Like needs a repair. Well, that's going to shut down the whole job site when you're talking about the crane because that's an integral piece of it. And so that is such a major obstacle for a lot of companies to overcome if they've built a reputation around that
So would
of
that be
that
like a
service.
conversion video? Like now they're at the stage, they know you exist. They're like, okay, all these people are successful with it,
Yeah.
but there's this lingering thing in their head because they know the biggest issues people have. Well, what if we
Yeah.
get it and then it breaks down? Or this, are they responsive? That kind of thing.
100%. And so we talk a lot about that to overcome those potential objections. And then something that we do too, which is a free piece of advice for anybody who's listening out there, is that not every testimonial is created equal. And so what I like to do is supercharge those testimonials so they're actually handling at least one or two objections proactively before the person who's watching it maybe even have thought of the objection or has had a chance to kind of vocalize it or internalize it. And so using that as an example, the service part of it, we know that that's a critical piece to it. And so when we're getting a testimonial from somebody and we're filming them talk about what they loved about Bigfoot Crane Company, and, a testimony that says something like, Bigfoot, these guys were just unbelievable. They showed up on time. They delivered the product. They did everything right. Love the safety approach that they have. Would totally recommend them. That sounds like a great testimonial. But if we're going to supercharge that, we're also going to get them to say, and you know what? Really distance them from the rest of the companies that we've used in the past is the level of service that these guys had. Not only did they, make sure that they had enough service technicians available to jump out there on the site, but they actually inventory the spare parts, unlike anybody else in the market does. And so our job site, we have an issue, it might be down for a couple hours, not a couple weeks. That's the difference between Bigfoot and the rest of the companies, and that's why we choose them over everybody else. That is supercharged. And you capture that on camera where somebody is authentically telling this story of how they've overcome those challenges for them. That is supercharged.
Yeah, no, thanks for walking through that kind of awareness, analysis, and conversion. I feel like it needs another A. So it's like your triple A system. I don't know what conversion would be an A. Not that you want to compete with actually triple A, but no, I really love how you share that buyer's journey. And I want to hear about the evolution of your services a little bit, right? Because
Sure.
like it starts off, obviously you're doing strategic consultant. Then I know you meet or one of your friends over, I don't know if it was a beer, that was like a rock star, like graphic designer, and you got into the kind of the explainer videos, but you found that, they weren't doing anything with them. So for in the we could talk about the crane example, what from the traffic side, right? You're putting it out, right? You're integrating it into their email and social, but I think you do paid traffic too.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and this is the thing that a lot of agencies will focus more on the awareness stage, which is all those items, right? So social media, so the non-paid ones, social media, PR, maybe, doing podcasts like this, right? Those would be in the earned media, unpaid kind of category, and then there's obviously a big bucket on the paid side of things, and so we do performance, paid advertising as well as direct outreach too. Those tend to be the main buckets and an SEO, of course, as well. Yeah.
And for the paid, are there certain channels that you like to specialize in?
Well, it really depends on on what the company, that we're working with, what industry they're in, where their audience is living, essentially, where do they spend their time? And so it's all about trying to get the lowest cost per conversion that we possibly can. And so we are usually testing a few different audiences. What we find where we spend most of our time for most of our clients, because we're in that B2B space, is we spend a lot of time in LinkedIn, Google, and then also Meta tends to generate a fair return as well, still for even the B2B businesses, even in industrial spaces. And we're starting to see quite the lift over on TikTok now as well. So those are the primary ones. But in terms of budget, where we spend, I would say the majority is still probably spent in Google, from because we do a lot on the nurturing side of things, and we find that that tends to be the lowest cost per acquisition there. And on the awareness stages, we spend a fair bit of effort and time and resources in LinkedIn and then Meta.
Let's talk about LinkedIn for a second. Obviously, it's a
Sure.
big, I think it's the best B2B platform out there. I don't know if there's another one out there that can compare. What are some of the mistakes people make when they're marketing on LinkedIn?
So are you talking specifically on the paid side of things or just LinkedIn in general?
Yeah, paid. It could be paid. It could be in general. We could do both.
Sure. So on the paid side of things, where I think a lot of people are making the mistake is that they continue to try to nurture there and nurturing. So on the paid side, LinkedIn is a little bit more of an expensive platform when it comes to per impression or per click and so on. And so what we like to do is leverage it to gain a foothold with the audience. Once we've got that awareness piece done, when we start to get them coming over to the website, we can start to pixel their browsers. We can then start to follow them around and position ads in front of them in cheaper platforms. And so what I always say and encourage people to do is use LinkedIn to really narrow into that buyer's persona, pay the premium that you have to there to get in front of the right audience, and then nurture them elsewhere. On the non-paid side of things, I think the biggest mistake that people have is one, they're just not active enough within the platform. And so one of the things that
I don't
we,
think Crane Company posting lots on LinkedIn social, but that's just me. Yeah.
yeah, well, and so this is the thing, even with that crane company, so their target audience is a little bit smaller than, say, a bookkeeper, or an accounting service. They basically have the opportunity to work with any business out there pretty much, but when it comes to the crane company, they have a smaller target. But even with that smaller target, it's about building the community, and building the relationships, right? And the problem that people have, and it's not one that is just isolated to LinkedIn. I mean, it's right across the board when it comes to social, is we as businesses, we tend to look at social media as a free place to place a billboard essentially. And so we go out there and we throw up all of our posts and we don't get a lot of engagement off of it. And we wonder why. And it's because they're focused on the second word, which is media, as opposed to the first word, which is social. And so you have to be social within these social platforms. LinkedIn is no different. And so the more that you engage with others, the more they're going to engage with you, the quicker you're going to start to build relationships, and then you're going to start to get engagement. And the biggest mistake that people have is when they're just pushing content out and not really participating with the community, is that they don't get that reciprocation occurring. And then what happens is, even if they have a massive following, so say you have 10,000 people that are following you and your page on LinkedIn, which isn't massive, but that's very substantial for most businesses out there. You're only going to get about 1% of those people who are actually following you that are going to see any post when you have very low engagement. Now, if you can get your engagement up, now all of a sudden you can unlock the potential of getting that in front of more and more people, because the algorithm, just like any other platform, favors the content that is getting engagement, because they have to have engaged audience, otherwise they don't have a platform anymore, right? So that's the incentive. And so we have to play that game. And the way that we do that is we have to be more social. So that's the biggest mistake, is that we just aren't social in social media.
I love how you broke that down, because it seems so obvious when you say it, but I never thought about it like that. There's the social and media, and people are just pushing out the media and not doing the social. It's funny because what people realize is on LinkedIn, if someone, let's say they tag me, right? What I typically do is I will like it, I will comment on it, and a lot of times share it and boost it in front of over 17,000 people.
Yeah.
And it's funny, if I tag someone, maybe someone will like it, maybe they won't, but I'm like, listen, this post is all about you. I would think you would like it, comment it, and share it, right?
Yeah.
Because it just benefits them. But I guess people are just conditioned just to maybe just observe more and not interact. So it is
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and I think it comes down to, for a lot of people, it's just that time benefit equation, right? So they don't get immediate benefit
Mm,
from all the work that goes into being social, spending the time and energy to do that. And so unless you have a personality type that you really like
it's a
to
good
do
point.
that anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's really easy for people to go, you know what, this is a platform in which I'm a member of, I look at occasionally, but I'm more of an observer than I am an active participant in terms of creating content and then having those conversations. So I think it's really easy to sit on the sideline because we're all very busy, right? I mean, we're all business people. We're all, have our regular tasks, and so to be in there actually doing something, it's you have to be quite intentional about it.
I know growing over time, you've grown, and I would love to hear about some of the key hires you put in place over time. And I'm going to pull up,
Yeah.
I encourage anyone to check out, you guys have a great, of course, let's say video of the origin story here, but talk about the team and some of the key hires over time.
Yeah, that's
And you have to name
so
people, but like positions wise, like who you had to put in place.
yeah, for sure. Um, so we grew quite rapidly through COVID, actually, and so that was really interesting times because we were having a really hard time finding people that were going to be able to fill the positions that we needed here locally. And so because COVID, we'd moved to a remote work environment, shut down the studio and the office space. It allowed me to then start to recruit outside of our geographical region. And so we have people now that work for us in, I think it's 7 different countries now. So we've got people scattered all over the place. And it's been really, really cool because uh, the diversity that comes from having a global workforce and the way that people look at, strategy and content and everything else that we're doing, it's just it's really good because otherwise you get caught in that echo chamber of what you know, and every region approaches things slightly different. And so it's been really, really rewarding to have that. Now that's on the people side of things. When you talk about the position side of things, as we were growing, and this is something you alluded to at the beginning of the intro, where that individual that you had on was talking about a lot of systems and so on, and that's a common theme that I've discovered with all of the successful entrepreneurs that I talk to on my podcast, is this ones that seem to be the most successful have really figured out how to dial in the systems and the processes within their business. And as we were growing rapidly, the systems that were working for our business became broken very quickly under the stress of the growth. And so the reaction that I had at that point was, well, we needed to, keep satisfying the needs of the clients. And so we just started throwing more people at it. And so we put another layer of middle management in place and built out my senior management team a little bit more. And what I was finding is that while our revenue was skyrocketing, our costs were skyrocketing as well. And so we weren't any more profitable in terms of dollars at the end of the day than what we were when we were smaller. And it was because of a lot of inefficiencies. And so what I did then is I had to really focus on building a team that could really tackle the inefficiency side of it and have a real focus on efficiencies. And so we put a new position in place called a VP of Operations, in which that person is obviously analyzing all the different aspects of our operation, but with a heightened sense of performance efficiency at every one of the different aspects of our business. And so that was a very key position that has, very much paid dividends for us as we now have refined our systems that were broken, and also have really shifted the culture to one of performance as opposed to just output.
Lance, it's interesting. So I was on a call, and by the way, we're looking at the Amplomedia page.com. And I love looking at people's about pages because it's oftentimes the second most visited page on their website. And I love kind of the layout you have with the video, who you are, let's grow. You still have a call to action there, which is awesome. And I love how you have the team on there, which is kind of you can tell people's personalities of their business and them how they have this set up, and you kind of have these cartoon characters, and then when you click on them, each of the people show up here, and then of course what you do, and then some what people are saying too. So I just want to point that out. But on the VP of operations side, I was just on a call with a group of agencies, and this was a hot topic for people. Either people were like, okay, I'm looking for a VP, I'm hiring a new VP. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear what were you looking for and what the process looked like to hire that person, because it is a key position.
Oh, it's such a key position, right? And I think that agencies, oftentimes the founders will take different approaches, and this is probably what you were getting in that conversation you were having with them. Is I find that there's kind of two different camps of agency owners. There's ones that are very operationally proficient and really like to focus on the operational side of the business, and then there's others that are much more on the creative side, who are really trying to advance the work that is being done, right? And then I guess there would be a third one that is more on the sales, business development, relationship side, right? So those would be kind of the three hats that in the early days, every entrepreneur is kind of having to wear all three of them at the same time. Usually we'll start to recruit in the sales support sooner than the operational support is what I've found in my experience. And that's what I did as well. But you get to a place where you can't manage it all, that's for sure. And so from an operational standpoint, even though, I felt that I was pretty proficient in operations, I just couldn't apply the same level of detail and time commitment to really making sure that everything was functioning properly. So what I was looking for when I was recruiting that position was somebody who, understood the agency world, because every industry has its own nuances, and the digital agency world is no different. And so having that understanding was really important. And then also having a very analytical mind. And I think the biggest challenge there was also having that personality match up to one that was, encouraging and team building. They really were focused on the soft side of management as well, because when you come in as an operation standpoint, you oftentimes are pointing out all the things that people are doing wrong. And you can really discourage your workforce really quickly, and you can have a collapse in your culture. And in a creative agency, you have to have, tons of teamwork and camaraderie in order to really create excellent creative assets and creative results. And so the fastest way to ruin your product, essentially what we're selling, which is creativity, the fastest way to ruin that is to gut the culture. And so that was a really key part that we had to focus on.
I find, Lance, hiring to be not so easy, and there's a lot of factors
Agreed.
involved. I'm curious if there's anything you
Yeah.
do in the hiring process, like specific questions you ask, because it's tough to, in this process, find, okay, someone is organized and then has empathy and, all these things. Are there
Mm.
any certain test projects you have people do, or any questions you ask to just at least aid in the process?
Oh, that's a really good question. You're really putting me on a spot here. What I would say is that definitely, like on the testing side, when we have you know jobs that we're recruiting for that have very specific technical requirements, well, then it's really easy to run some sort of testing for that.
Right. Like, can you run paid
Uh,
ads? Like, show us how to
yeah.
do it. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you're a designer or whatever, right? So that's not so difficult. Where it's a lot more difficult is the soft people skills part of it, right? Because if you're a good interviewee, you know the right things to be
Like, are
saying.
you nice? Yes, I'm nice. Okay, check.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
what are they going to
exactly.
say? I'm not nice.
And even the behavioral type questions that one would ask, like give me some examples of how you demonstrated X, Y, Z. How do you think about this, and show me or demonstrate or talk to me about a situation that went sideways and so on. Those are all really important questions to be asking, but again, they're ones that a good interviewee is going to be able to navigate through pretty easily. I spend a lot of time just getting to know the individual as much as I can. So, you know, because I have a global workforce, I don't have the ability to, sit down across from a table with them or go out for coffee or beer or whatever the case might be, and really get to know them that way. That was very effective back in the day. So now it's really a series of video calls, and so we, go through a number of rounds of it, and it's just really trying to get to know who they are, get to know their backstory, get to know the things that really motivate them, that make them tick. And then I spend a lot of time actually with the references that they give. And so most of the time when I'm talking to a reference, it's at least a half-hour conversation. And the same thing, just I want to get to know them personally a little bit more, and then build that relationship where they are a little bit more open and they're kind of rooting for me to succeed as much as the person that referred or that has them as a reference to succeed as well. And so usually I can, if there's a yellow flag that comes up where I'm like, oh, I'm not too sure if this particular trait or skill or whatever is present in that person, like I got a little bit of that may or may not be there. That's where I really zero in on those reference checks and have deep conversations with those people. So that's I would say would be
Yeah.
my
No, that's
my secret.
helpful to think about. And I love how you talked about the behavioral questions because you're kind of putting them in a scenario. And although we can't see people in all these scenarios, you can ask them about scenarios and see how they respond and react. And then the reference checks too, you can glean a lot of information. I want to talk about, I know one thing you're thinking of as a company is channel partners. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts and how you navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that so up in Canada, it's not, especially in our area anyway, it's not as common to have really structured referral arrangements set out. And so we've been expanding into the US over the last few years quite aggressively. And so most of my outreach, most of my outbound activities are south of the border. And so what I was finding is that some of the people I was talking to there who were giving me a little bit of coaching and guidance and mentoring me were saying, I think, Lance, you really need to be looking at formalizing some sort of referral program because it's a little bit more expected in the US than what it is in Canada. And so I thought, okay, well, where do
Canadians are too nice. They're like, don't worry about it. We're
Well, a little bit of that, for sure, right? Where it's just like, you know what, I just want to connect people who are going to be able to do a great job. And so whether there's some money incentive or not, I still want to make that connection, and I don't want to feel obligated, I guess, in some respect too, to make that connection as well. And I don't need to profit off of that. If you just
Yeah,
yeah,
everyone has
just
a
like
different
bottom up.
mentality. I've heard like
Yeah.
I know people like, no, I don't need anything. I just want to do good by my customer, friend, colleague. And
Yep.
some
Yep.
people are like, oh, sure, I'll take it if it's there. And some people are only incentivized if that's happening. So I'm sure there's
Yeah.
different buckets. I think of kind of Adam Grant's, I don't know if it fits into the same book, a give and take, where there's like givers, takers, and matchers. And I'm curious
Yeah.
where those people would fit into one of those buckets. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so as I started to embrace this, and I was like, okay, so where do I start? And so turned to ChatGPT and started my research and started creating the program and whatnot. And then at that point, I wanted to be very intentional. And so coming from a very analytical kind of thinking background, on the strategy side, I just started to do a bunch of outreach to people who I thought would be fit, who I think would be my best channel partners. and just started having conversations with them and really walk them through, okay, so this is what I'm thinking, but I want your honest feedback. Give that to me, and let me know if this is something that would motivate somebody like you or not. And so a lot of those conversations and refinement of that. And it was kind of frustrating because one person would say one thing and then the other person would completely
What were some of
contradict
the things
what that
people were
was.
saying? Like what I love that approach,
Yeah,
first of all, is just get direct feedback,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
let's not guess, let's just ask. Like the
yeah,
best, copywriters, direct response marketers I know literally ask the customer and then repeat what they're saying. Right? They're not,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot more that goes into it, of course, but really it's coming from the words of the customer, right? So what were some of the feedback you were
Totally.
getting when you were having these
Yeah.
conversations?
Well, and I should also just mention too, just as a little side note, the strategy of getting that feedback was double-sided, right? So on the one side, I was getting legitimate feedback that I could use to refine it, but also on the other side, with the cold outreach that I was doing with it, it was actually opening a lot of doors that and conversations with people who were ideally suited. And so I was basically pitching them on being a referral partner of mine without actually pitching them on it, because at the end of those conversations, oftentimes the comment was, yeah, and so once you get that finalized, Lance, I would be very interested in being one of your channel partners. And so it really worked well from a sales standpoint too. So some of the contradictory feedback that I was getting was around the tiers, and so some people were saying, "Well, I think that you should reward people at different levels based off of how committed they were." And so some commitment indicators that were being tossed around was the number of referrals that they would make or the value of the referrals that they would make to
So we're
you
talking
over.
like, let's say someone introduces $100,000 client, maybe they get, I'm making this up, 10% or whatever the percent is. And if you choose a $5,000 client, you get 5% or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it was less about the individual value, but more the cumulative value, whether that was in the number of referrals that were made or the value of the deals that were advanced. And so, as somebody who just does a one-off for you, like they're not really a committed referral partner, but somebody who is referring, one a week to you or one a month or whatever that cadence is going to be, frequency is going to be. Well, then they're obviously much more committed to you, and so you should be more committed to them, as the theory went. Now, then I would talk to somebody else and say, okay, so this is the feedback that I'm getting. And so this is what I'm thinking in terms of the tiers. And so I created three different tiers at these different levels and had these different requirements and stuff. And they would be like, wow, you're just making it way too complicated, right? Like just give them everybody the same thing. Don't overcomplicate it, because otherwise people are going to get caught up in the weeds of the complication of it, and then you're going to have a harder time getting them excited or motivated or to close them as a referral partner as well. There was also the level of like I thought that I might want to really educate them on the products and services that we offer so that they could speak more intelligently about what it was that we were doing, so they understood who was a really good fit, maybe who wasn't, and then also could talk to them a little bit more about the nuances of how we stack up against our competitors out there in the marketplace as well. And so some people just love that, and it's thought, yeah, like you should almost like a mini academy almost is the way that it was. Some people wanted to go, which was really extreme and really training, and then other people again were like no, you just can't expect people to invest that level of time and energy into into learning about your product and service just to be a referral partner. So I think it really depends on the type of referral partner that you're really trying to get. If it's somebody that's going to be more like acting almost like an agent, then definitely more training and stuff is involved, needed, is what I was kind of sussing out, reading between the lines of the people that were giving me the different levels of advice anyway.
Lance, I know we're right at the time here. I did have two last questions. If you don't have time for them, we will skip them. If you do, they're not long questions. If
Sure,
you have to
sure, hit
go, I
'em.
don't want to make you late to your next call. But one thing I'm going to say, piggybacking on your comment, is I remember one of my friends who has a software company was looking for investors, And he said what you said. He said, when I asked for money, I got advice. When I asked for advice, I got money. So, which is kind of similar to what you're saying with this, having conversations with referral partners. That reminded me.
Yeah.
So the two last questions. One, who are ideal referral partners? Maybe someone's listening. They should talk to
Yeah.
you. Who are ideal referral partners, channel partners for you at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah, what we find our best ones are people who have some sort of trusted position, with our end, target customer. And so, like I said, we're mostly in the B2B service-based business space. So, coaches, consultants who are working with businesses that are in that B2B space, they tend to be our best referring partners. But we also get a lot of referrals from accounting firms, bookkeeping companies, because they understand where companies are at in terms of their appetite for growth, but also their ability to grow, and their ability to, pay somebody to help them with the growth as well, right? We get oftentimes a lot of people that reach out to us when they're at kind of the end of their rope, so to speak, where things have gotten so bad where they're just like, we need revenue, like we need more customers, but then they don't have the ability to really pay for the services as well. Those aren't ideal. They're ideal in the sense that they need our services, but they bad debt becomes a bit of a problem with some of them. And so having relationships with people who have a little bit of a better understanding as to where that business is at, is really, really helpful. So those tend to be, our best ones, but basically anybody who has a network of other businesses that are selling services to businesses, those tend to be the best ones, right? Because they can make those introductions.
Last question, Lance, is we have to talk about the podcast, right?
Yeah.
We've showed amplomedia.com. You can check it out. If you go to resources, you can check out Amplify Your Business. I want to hear about some of the fan favorite episodes. I know it's like picking your favorite child, but I'm going to make you do it. So who are some of the fan favorite episodes? Name a few that people should check out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had so many. It's I think we're over 300 now episodes in, and so we've had the privilege of talking to a lot of different people, a lot of different kinds of businesses. Um, so so yeah, to pick out some of them, I mean, Mike Staver, who is a leadership coach out of the US, he was definitely one of my favorites because he's just unpacked so much great knowledge. He's just so well versed in helping companies and individuals become better leaders and really grow. So definitely love him. This is a recent one that you just have up here, Lilia. She was fantastic in terms of just her approach to the way that she started her business and the way that she services her clients and so on. Imran, and sorry, I'm trying to remember his last name. Just such a leader in terms of the way that he has built his startup.
Here he is, right
He's
here.
right there.
Catch
Yeah,
proof.
yeah. It's just what a great guy. He's introduced me to a number of different people who I've had on the show since as well, and just such a well-respected
What is
individual.
Hatch Proof? What do they do?
So they're on the HR side of
Okay,
things, and so they help businesses um, understand retention, basically,
cool.
and so employee retention. Yoni there,
I know Yoni. He's a good
yeah,
guy.
what an interesting time that we were talking too, because I was right at the start of the Hamas Israel war there,
Yeah,
and so he's over in
he's from
Israel.
there.
Yeah, and so we're having conversations, and he's just like, at any moment, I might have to run and jump into the bomb shelter, and it's just like this is a world that I just don't understand. I could never understand, right? But great entrepreneur. He's got so many things on the go. He does a lot of like his primary thing that we were talking about was his outsourcing to the Philippines and how he's helping people
I
do
think it's
that
called
successfully.
Multiply Me. Maybe is that the one?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
multiply me.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, there, I mean, it's just it goes on and on and
This
on.
is awesome. First of
It,
all, Lance, I just want to thank you for sharing your journey, your lessons. This has been fantastic. I want to encourage people to check out amplomedia.com to learn more and more episodes of the podcast. And we'll see everyone next time. Lance, thanks so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.